5 people have been arrested by law enforcement agencies in Tsakane. This after protesters went on rampage in displaying their frustration at having no access to water for almost 4 weeks. Hundreds of protesters took to the streets, throwing rocks and burning tyres. Police fired rubber bullets at the protesting residents in an effort to disperse them. But is protest action in South Africa bringing positive change, or is it threatening our human rights to security? Now we're joined by scholar and activist Dr Trevor Ngwane, who we will be asking these questions to. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon, sir. Now, protests, of course, by no means new to South Africa and almost always tied to the lack of service delivery. What can we read into the latest protests so close to next year's elections?
Thank you very much for having me. Yes, the conditions are real terrible for the working class and for the poor. As you know, we have unemployment, poverty, inequality. Also, now we've got this problem of the unequal provision of services, water, electricity, housing, and the poor people are facing an unsympathetic and unresponsive state. And most importantly, the state is becoming authoritarian, less tolerant of the people when they protest and demand what is due to them.
Asking the question, do protests in South Africa bring positive change? Because we've been seeing year in and year out people taking to the streets, even having South Africans being described as a violent nation, that the only way that they can even speak or engage with government is to take to the streets and burn tyres and cause havoc and destroy, buildings that are meant to better societies.
Yeah, if the state ignores protest, it ignores the appeals of the people, the writings on the wall, that state, that government is going to fall. And in South Africa, the 2024 elections are around the corner. So when people protest, whether the government responds positively or negatively, usually it's very unresponsive. The people protesting learn something about the government. So remember, people go to the streets when they are very frustrated, when they are very angry. And then when nothing happens, they learn a lesson. And then they say, one day we'll find a way, a mechanism to get rid of this government. So I think whether in the immediate protests work or not, but in the long term, it's collapse for the government of the ANC.
Let's turn our focus then, as you rightfully say, to those that are responsible. One thing that COVID-19 has shown us is that there is still, very much poor implementation of policies and also just a fundamental failure of, political leadership. What will it take then for us to see a change in government where there is political will? We know, of course, from a government perspective, there have been these imbizos that have been held in every province, but yet we are still staying and sitting with the same fundamental problems in this country.
Yeah, what we need is a reorientation of the state, of the government. I think the focus at the moment is on self-enrichment, it's on capital accumulation, it's on profit making. So you find that the state, the municipality, national government, provincial structures are used as a funnel to channel public money into private pockets, tenders, subcontracting. So I really think that we have to reprioritize and start putting people before profits, but to be as the government slogan says.
You know, one of the biggest challenges now that South Africans are facing outside of, the economic challenges is the water and electricity crisis or energy crisis that we are facing, today. And to date, it seems like there is no, end in sight in terms of that being resolved. But then you have institutions like the South African Human Rights Commission that do find some of these municipalities violating human rights. But at the end of the day, there is no accountability. How then can citizens ensure that such do happen without us having to burn down buildings?
Yeah, we don't have to burn down buildings, but we should always be protesting, putting pressure, because there's something called quantitative molecular action change. But one day that becomes a qualitative break. And I'm telling you, 2024 in the election box, in the ballot box, there'll be that break where maybe South Africa is going to enter the era of coalition governments. Another thing is that what has been happening, there's been a continuation of the past injustices of apartheid, where black townships, rural areas, villages, people who were suffering under the old order continue to suffer. So the greatest failure of this government after 29 years, next year it will be 30 years, is the failure to upgrade, water and electricity systems, provide enough basic services in order to roll back the oppressions, inequalities of the past. So they failed on that score.
Now, we saw, of course, in the 2021, elections that there was a voter apathy from South Africans, a number of them still asking themselves, if I do go to the polls in 2024, who do I vote for? Who can I trust? Just talk to us about the importance of actually going out there and casting that vote and how that empowers you at the end of the day, especially for those young South Africans who are really disillusioned.
Yeah, it's very important to vote. The issue is, who do you vote for? So we need to create organizations, political parties who speak and who have the interests of the people at heart. So unfortunately, most of the parties, they tend to be pro-capitalist, pro the rich. People become politicians in order to make themselves rich. But I do believe that ordinary people will get wise and start forming organizations, parties that can actually represent them. A bit of a window has been created because the election law is going to change, and independent, also local community organizations will be able to run for national and provincial elections. I think that will be a step towards, forming political parties who represent people truly and are not just there to make money for themselves.
Indeed, Dr. Ngwane, thank you so much for your time.